welcome you to the March 2nd, 2021 Ordinance Committee meeting for the City of Santa Barbara. Ms. Crisante, if you would take roll.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez.
Present.
Chair Jordan.
Here. And do we have any public comment today for items not on the agenda?
At this time, no one has raised their hand to speak on items not on the agenda.
Okay, then we will close public comment and move to our only item, which is adoption of an enabling ordinance and funding authorization to support the community benefit district for Coast Village area and city. Mr. Harris, I see you. Take it away.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Ordinance Committee, and the public. Jason Harris, City's Economic Development Manager. I'm presenting the staff report regarding the Community Benefit District Enabling Ordinance. Next slide, please. Coast Village, this item was heard by Council on February 8th of this year, 2021, in regards to Coast Village Association's request of funding. Council in the suggestion that the city adopt an enabling ordinance to set a petition threshold and a term different than the state law provides. Council indicated support of this effort and directed staff to return with an ordinance and authorization. Community benefit districts or special benefit districts created for the purpose of establishing a stable revenue source to fund special benefit services within a targeted business district. Property owners within a district, once approved through a public process, Proposition 218, would pay property assessments to fund special services above and beyond general municipal service levels. The assessments may pay for services such as additional sidewalk sweeping, beautification programs, district branding, marketing, promotions, and things such as that. CVA is requesting $30,000 in funding to pay the consultant expenses to prepare the required formation documents. The city will incur up to an additional $10,000 in outside legal expenses. And the Coast Village Association is also recommending the city adopt an enabling ordinance that sets a petition threshold at 30% and an initial district term up to 20 years in order to recognize the low rate of return of mail-in petitions and non-engaged property owners, as well as the cost of renewing the district in the effort thereof. Next slide, please. So the state law that governs the formation of these property assessment districts has it's a two-step process. Petitions are the first step and ballots are the second. Both are mailed to property owners in the process. In the state law, they have a standard requirement of a 50% petition threshold, as well as, which that can be changed by a local enabling ordinance, thus the item before you today. The state constitution, though, does not allow for any change to the ballot process. That's a 50% basis, and that does not change regardless of the petition threshold. The state law also establishes that the initial term be at 5 years, no greater, and renewal can be no greater than 10 years. And in recognition of the benefits that these districts can provide, 22 charter cities and growing throughout the state have established enabling ordinances that have lower petition thresholds and longer terms. Next slide, please. So as such, and council, as I referenced, heard this on February 8th, gave indication of interest to evaluate an enabling ordinance. As such, one has been submitted. It establishes a petition threshold of 40%. It does still have the 5-year initial term. However, we have made adjustments in allowing for renewals up to 20 years, as well as an adjustment that a 5-year renewal would not go through the petition process, just a written request of owners, as well as authorization, maybe not separate from this ordinance, but this will be for the council for authorization of the expenditures thereof. So with that, this concludes the staff presentation, and I'm available for any questions, as well as the city attorney. And I believe we have Coast Village representatives and their consultants available if there's questions of those individuals.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. So questions to council members? And I will point out, I'm sure everybody realizes just because of a timeline concern, we're stopping here like we normally would stop with an ordinance, but it's also we're going to see this again today at council. So your questions and comments, we'll get 2 opportunities to share today. Councilmember Snedden.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. I have a couple questions. Well, for like, how much does this actually mean for a space? So, and this might be a question for representatives from Coast Village Association, but you say there was I don't know, 1,000 square feet, a foot space. How much would that translate to? Do you have an estimate for something like that?
Yes, I can, Mr. Chair and Council members, then I'll attempt to answer that. So so I think your question is in relation to the assessments. How much does that ultimately equate to individual properties and property owners? So this is, we're at the beginning stages. They have done some conceptual evaluation for Coast Village of a district that's probably the 300 to 400,000 a year annual assessment budget that they would be looking to generate through the approximately 70 parcels that exist within the Coast Village commercial district area. And then as a part of the next steps of process, if council was so inclined to proceed, and the Coast Village representatives were similarly inclined to proceed because there's still additional fundraising required to complete the overall consultant study effort, they would be developing a management plan that would establish both the overall funding as well as the services. And probably the most pertinent to answer your question is the formula, the assessment formula. And there's generally 3 metrics that they utilize. It's the lot square footage, the frontage of property, as well as a combination of either the use of the property, is it residential, commercial, and size of square footage. And so I've seen districts take all variation forms of this. Lots of times they may just use a street frontage formula. In most instances, in my experience working in other communities, it's a formula that has a combination of all 3. So you'd have a combination of the amount of building square footage, the amount of lot area, and the frontage, some combination. Ultimately, that formula is put into the management plan, and that is ultimately what the property owners are voting on through the ballot process. So it's not just creating a district, but it's create a district under the auspices, under the definition of the management plan that establishes. So it's a long roundabout way to explain the composition. Ultimately, until they go through that process, the specific cost to each individual property based upon the composition of the formula will then be determined. And it could run anywhere from a few $100s to a few $1,000s, again, depending on the overall budget. But just kind of rough thumbnail estimate of a 300 or 400,000 year budget of 70 parcels. If everything was 1-to-1, you could do the math thereof. Obviously, but each of those parcels are not identical in all composition, size, and the use, et cetera. And so that's why you'll see a variation of assessment rates. Hopefully that answered your question.
That does answer my question about how these things are calculated. I've heard numbers for this particular project that it might be something like $40 or $50 a month. So I'm looking for a range. When you say a couple $1,000 or so.
No, I was going to just bring my calculator out and just do some rough calculation, not try to attempt it. So again, if you were to use the 300,000, which I think is their minimum that they're pursuing, and you just took across the board all 70 parcels, that would be 4,000 for each parcel. Recognizing that's assuming they're all the same size.
Is that for a year?
Per year, correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, so it's minimal. Okay.
Yeah, and then divide that on a so.
Okay. Thank you. And so then, once this is established, who's the administrator? I think we had some question about that after council. I had some questions about that. People asked me and had made assumptions about who the administrator would be, but do you know
Well, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Snedden, when you say the administrator, so there's the management plan is established and there's a services that are being established that would be paying for. Ultimately, they'll form an association or an oversight of property owners, kind of board of directors. And then they would have the decision whether they want to administer themselves or if they want to contract for those services. My understanding is they would be contracting for an administrative services. New America City, who's established a number of these throughout California, also equally manages a number of these. And so there's a lot of economies of scale of their administration. So there's the combination of, just the annual process of updating, property records of that, as well as the oversight of any, service contracts being entered into. Ultimately, the individual property owners, associations, giving the oversight of, if they're doing a marketing campaign, what's it going to be based on? And if they're providing support to businesses, what is that level of support? So it's as much individual in the individual district as well as how it's administered. Okay,
thank you. And I think I'll save, I would like to make adjustments to these numbers that are proposed. So I guess I'll save that for the discussion portion of that. And I just, for today, for the ordinance committee portion, are we settling on the numbers that we're recommending to council? Is that part of our charge today? Or is it just a yes, no enabling? Is the recommendation for the numbers themselves?
Well, the ordinance being put forth is the staff recommendation. I believe this committee has the autonomy, the ability to make adjustments and recommendations to council to inform. I'd refer to the city attorney for kind of the legislative process and the discretion thereof.
Okay, thank you. I'll wait for discussion. Thank you.
Councilmember Gutierrez, any questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my only question is, let's say theoretically the group of people who are asking for this city funding is not using it appropriately, or we get notified that there's some fiscal misconduct happening. What recourses do we have as a city if that were the case? Like, can we just pull the money back out, or what would be our course of action?
Chair Jordan, Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez, let me take that, if I might. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The ordinance allows the district to be disestablished on a 30% petition. So the answer is the city doesn't have the direct power to stop the funding at any point in time. Mr. Casey asked that we address that by limiting the initial time period to 5 years rather than the 20 that had been originally requested by the Coast Village Road people. That mitigates the risk. Then the ordinance would allow the presumably Coast Village Road nonprofit that manages this under contract with the city to extend in 5-year increments without any petition whatsoever, kind of like how we handle our downtown assessment areas, or they could extend with a petition up to 20 years. So the primary control is in that first 5-year increment, see if it works out well, and then extend. The district can be disestablished, but it takes a property owner petition.
Okay, thank you. That was my only question.
Thanks. And then I think I just have a couple questions on the numbers and the actual ordinance itself. So I'm not sure if that would be Mr. Harris or Mr. Colon. My first one is on what is page 4 in our attachment, section B in the middle of the page, which talks about, if I'm understanding this right, which talks about any single parcel's impact on the total assessment by, I'm assuming by weight. And that number there is that no single parcel would account for more than 20% of the entire weighted decision. Am I reading that right?
Chair Jordan, I believe it's no single property owner, not a single parcel.
Okay.
This language is identical to that which was submitted by the Coast Village consultant, Mr. Lee Mandry. However, Ms. Bjork in the city administrator's office asked me to redraft it to make it clearer. Hopefully I've done that by breaking it into sections A, B, and C, but it's substantively identical to what had been proposed.
So my question is, why is that number so high? Why would we allow one property owner to control 20% of the entire decision for the business improvement district?
I can't think of a policy basis. What this provision is trying to do actually looks at it from the problem from the other direction. It says that regardless how much property you own, you only get 20% of a vote. So I don't know whether 20% is a magic number. It's not. It is a number you could change if you wanted to.
Okay. Did either of you have an opinion on that number at being 20%? To me, I guess that's my question. It seems high. I'm just wondering what you've seen before, Mr. Harris, I guess.
Well, this is, Mr. Chair, in response, this is identical in the state law. So there wasn't a proposed change from either the Coast Village representatives or the city in modifying that. In this case, there is no property within the 70 parcels within Coast Village that even comes close to a representation of 20%. This is,
okay,
as the city attorney was describing, this is the kind of, depending on how you view one scenario that in the possibility that there could be a district formed at some point in the future, for instance, that if there was any one parcel that dominated and had more than 20%, their vote would be constrained because it's a weighted vote on the petition and ballot process. That it would be a constrained weight element, and in this case, and even in downtown where we have some large property owners, if one was to imagine out in the future, I don't think we even have that representation if unless you had a really small 2-block area or something of that nature.
Well, so using that example, I guess I don't want to run this into the ground, but it just seems like, what is the reasoning to allow, if you have 100 parcels and one property owner happens to own, do the math for me, 20% would be 20 of them, right? Just doing parcel math, not weighted. Why would you allow that property owner to have that much of a decision over the other 80 parcels, just doing parcel math, not weighted math?
If I might help, Chair Jordan, remember that let's assume this person owns 40% of the property. They're going to pay 40% of the assessments,
Okay.
but they only get 20% of the vote.
Okay, fair enough. I like that. Thank you. And if you turn the page, you explained that already. You turn another page to page 6. So what I heard you just said about disestablishment, I think is only half of what happens in the ordinance. The council can also at any time of their own initiative seek to disestablish the district if they feel something's not going correctly. Is that the way this reads?
Mr. Chair, I'll defer to the city attorney, but
That-
my understanding
that-
is there would be an action council would take, but I don't believe the council could initiate. I believe it's a requirement of the property owners to submit the written petition, making representation that they would want to disestablish.
The first line there actually used the words of its own initiative at any time. So I read there's two paths. There's two paths. One is the participants' paths, and the other is the council path. Either one of those could be taken, right?
That's correct, Chair Jordan.
Okay. And then when you go down 4 more lines to the path by the district participants who would be unhappy, is that 30% number a mimic of a state format also?
Yes.
Okay. And so humor me on this thought process too. If the state is a 30% template number for qualifying for petitioning and a 30% number on disestablishment, but we feel that we need greater participation for the initial qualification. So the recommendation is 40%. Would it make just as much sense on the tail end to say, we're also not going to let a smaller amount of people have the say in disestablishment, but make that reach the same benchmark of 40% as we did on the front end? Is that logical?
It is. It is.
Okay. And we could do that.
Yes.
Okay. I think that's my only questions. So unless anybody pops up with more questions as a result of that, we'll go to public comment. So Ms. Grisante, if you would lead the way on public comment, please.
Yes, of course. Our first public speaker will be Trey Pinner. Trey Pinner, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Great. Well, thank you all for taking this matter up. And I really want to thank staff and the city attorney for the efforts they've taken the past couple of weeks for this. We really appreciate the effort in this partnership that we're trying to create. So thank you. I do want to just hit on a few items of the ordinance, and all of you have kind of hit on them. I'd first like to address on 4.45.080, which is the term. And it was commented that we have the right to renew the term for 5 years without the petition. But again, we can only renew for 5 years. I would respectfully request that if we have to go, once we do the 5 years, that the next round could be longer than 5 years because of the cost every time to do a full-blown one that would be longer. If the owners, the property owners are unhappy with the situation after those 5 years, and we ask for a 10 or 15 year, they can choose to not approve it in the ballot. So we just think having a longer term after the first 5 years is very important because we're looking to build some or have some ability to provide infrastructure issues, little things that might require some financing. And then I would touch on the other issue of dissolution. Councilmember Jordan just mentioned that it had 30% here, but 40%. I would respectfully request that we should have 30% for both sides for the initiation and the dissolution. And remember, we keep saying have a say. Remember that 30% is just the petition to ask them to have the say to them. And then I would request on that 20%, no property owner over 20%, I would request and that would be reduced. If we go to 30%, that should be reduced to 15% to be more equitable and more in line with what you're doing. And again, my time has run out. I can't thank you enough and appreciate the effort. Thank you all.
Our next speaker will be Bob Ludwig. Liquid, please go ahead.
Great, thank you for hearing this matter. And I agree with Trey. the acknowledgement of staff and the council for taking this up on a very quick matter. And thank you, Jason, for the presentation both 3 weeks ago and again today. I just want to echo Trey's remarks and say amen to all of those. I do think the disestablishment percentage should remain lower. All due respect to Councilman Chair Jordan, I think in an effort to make it fair, I would be concerned that the disestablishment bar would be too high to jump. And so I would think it should be what we call square in the pilot world, that they should be the same. And again, it is just the starting blocks, the 30% that we're advocating. It doesn't mean that we're unhappy and won't do the deal at 40, but it just makes more sense at 30 to us. Let me speak to two other matters. One, the estimated cost. Again, Jason did a spectacular job of identifying that we aren't at a point where we can say exactly, but if we were targeting on the order of 300,000, we think the distribution would amount to about 5 cents per square foot per premise. So 1,000 square foot premise would have 5 cents per foot per month could be passed through to them. That's a ballpark. While it may not be negligible, it certainly isn't a huge number. Then secondly, on management, we do not plan to have, our consultant is New City America, but we will self-manage this. Our board and our steering committee will manage this. The amount of money is not enough to warrant a full contract. Thank you.
Okay, our final speaker is going to be Rick Lemo. Rick Lemo, please go ahead. Mr. Lemo, you're self-muted. Go ahead and click your microphone.
Oh, can you hear me all right now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Before I begin, I just wanted to let all of you know that I am the one person here who has begun districts and sat as president of boards of districts in 4 different cities, all different sizes, one significantly smaller than even just the membership on Coast Village Road. And there was something that came up at the last meeting that I wanted to make sure I covered in depth just a little more. It is really very negligible the way things get passed on to the tenant. Number one, the absolute first and primary beneficiaries of the district are the tenants. The second beneficiaries of the district are guests, community members, those who come to the district for a variety of reasons. The property owners pay for this, and yes, they are permitted to pass that through in most leases. However, what's really important is 100% of the benefit helps the tenant first and foremost. And the reason is most of the property owners have leases where they're locked in. They can't, based upon results, they can't raise their rent higher than a certain amount. What's really beautiful about this district is these property owners bellied up to the bar, many of them, and donated their money to do special things right now without any ability to pass it through. That has a very strong chance of going away because you can only pay so much. In this situation, it stops them from raising or having a bake sale every time they turn around in order to be able to plan effectively and move forward effectively. I happen to be with Caruso. We are not direct members of the district, but have been participating in the board from the very beginning. And we participate in 3 districts. In one district, we are the largest contributor, and we take not 1 penny out of the district. We don't allow them to do any of the work that they'll be doing here in front of our properties. We just feel it's good for the whole organization. I apologize for going over and remain available for any questions that you want.
Chair Jordan, we have an additional speaker that's raised our hand.
Okay,
Natalia Gavoni. Natalia Gavoni, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Chair Jordan and committee members. As you all are aware, the MCA tried to get a bid for the East Side District in 2015 and unfortunately failed. To date, it has never been attempted to be resuscitated, which is truly unfortunate because we all still suffer with our district looking and feeling like a dumping ground. So I am urging all of you here today to help us, like you are doing for Montecito, get a bid implemented for our district. We are constantly forgotten and overlooked, which is why our district continues to look so unattractive and so unappealing. Thank you.
thanks. Is that it, Ms. Crisante?
Yes, Chair Jordan, there are no further speakers.
Thank you so much. We'll close public comment and bring it back to the committee for additional questions or comments. Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. So I just want to start off by saying I think, especially in light of their last speaker too, that we really want this to be successful. We are putting up money towards this, and if it's successful, then we get our investment back. So we want it to be successful, obviously. And I think to that end, I'm just going to advocate for 30% threshold to initiate. It still has to go to the ballot after that. I think that lower threshold of 30% also helps others. We just heard from the last speaker, may help that lower threshold with other areas throughout the city that might want to give this a try. And again, it's just to initiate the process. It doesn't then hoist it on anybody if it's not voted in by the state laws. So I would say 30% initiate, 30% dissolution. And really, I would like to propose a 15-year term to start because with capital investments, and we're seeing this with parklets, we're seeing this on State Street, if there's a 5-year, then there may be a delay in the capital improvements that property owners will want to invest in. They may wait that 5 years and then wait another. So I think to just give it the bump that it needs to be successful right out of the gate, and this can really be a model for other areas of the city, but I think they have what they need to move forward on this one, and we can adjust from there if it doesn't seem that this was suitable. But I'm all for 30% initiation, 30% dissolution, and a 15-year term to begin with, and then renewable at a different rate after that.
Other comments? Councilmember Gutierrez?
Thank you, Chair. I agree about the 30%, but not about the 15 years. I think 5 years is reasonable. And I also want to comment on what the last caller had to say. Well, I have a question. So when we're talking about, equity and equality, when it comes to the city giving attention to different areas and neighborhoods, I can't help but to agree with that caller that the East Side does have some issues when it comes to the way that it basically looks blighted, and whether or not the city can aid them in making that a better situation. And so does the West Side, and so do some parts of the upper State Street area. So I don't know, maybe this is just a question for another meeting, but I just kind of want to throw it out to my colleagues now about whether we can have a conversation to have some kind of potential plan of how we can aid these other business districts. That's just something I want to throw out there. But basically the 30% I agree with. The 5 years, I feel like is fair. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Harris, can I invite you back on? So I kind of have a question on the differences in the terms. So walk me through again, so I don't misunderstand when I read it, on a 5-year term, the way it's in the ordinance again. If I want the longer term after that, there are additional hurdles to jump through rather than just another 5-year term, right?
Correct. So in the ordinance, we're providing for a renewal of 5 years without having to conduct the petition process. So it saves, one step in time and effort. We also allow for renewals up to 20 years. That would require the same process we're going through now, a petition and then a ballot process. But we do have the 20-year renewal ability.
And are we restricted by state law, or could we also say, for example, the 30-30, a 5-year term initially, but allow an up to 20-year renewal without a petition process?
I would defer to the city attorney on that. However, we are allowing a 5-year renewal without a petition process. So I guess that is the question is.
Yeah, that's my question.
Change the 5-year to 20.
Yes. Yes.
You could? Okay.
Yes.
So, so I guess I am convinced too with I wasn't a week or two ago too on the 30% initial. And part of what convinces me there is the reduction of the threshold to 30% for a disestablishment. I think those numbers should be the same. And so if they follow down, and I think part of the proving ground is the first 5 years. So I would offer as a compromise between that view and Councilmember Snedden's view is that we would allow the renewal after 5 years to go to any term allowed to up by state law without having to jump through the hoops of a petition. It would just go whatever that easier process is. So that would be how I would kind of phrase bridging the two questions here together. Does anybody else have any discussion they want to make on that, or look for a motion for recommendation, or even just bring our discussion and move forward another 40 minutes and have this whole discussion again at council? I'm open to any of those. Councilmember Snedden.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. So I think the 30% is, I think, the key part, and then however we need to negotiate the terms to compromise on that so that everybody's comfortable, I think is important. I think I like what you offered, the 5 years, and then for renewal with the less complicated process, but I guess I just want clarification on exactly what that is, because I wasn't listening to it in that framework when Mr. Kalam was answering the question.
Mr. Kalam.
Thank you. The streamlined renewal process would be a simple application from the nonprofit entity managing the district for Coast Village.
Thank you. So then unless there was objection to that, then it would be sort of a ministerial approval, or would it still come to council, or what happens
It
then?
would still, excuse me, the extension would still be subject to the majority protest process. And post Prop 218 in 1996, there are 3 things you need to know about special assessments. Let me throw it in before we're done. 1, public property has to be assessed. You've been assured there is not public property involved in this one. 2, special benefit is very tightly defined. We'll be reviewing that in the management district plan when it's submitted. And 3rd, the majority protest cannot be overridden by the city council. It's binding should there be a majority protest.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. Then I'm in favor of that, Chair Jordan. I think that's the 5-year with the more streamlined process option, and with the 30% square initiation and dissolution threshold.
Can we make that a motion for recommendation then?
I will make that motion. Yeah.
I'll
Um,
second.
Perfect. I'm good too, obviously. So I don't see the need for any further discussion. So Ms. Grisante, do you understand the motion and would you like to take a roll call?
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. So we are gonna move with a 30% petition threshold with a 5-year streamlined process. That was moved by Councilmember Sneddon, second by Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez.
So 30% on the front, 30% on the back, disestablishment, initial 5-year term with what we're calling the streamlined process for a renewal term up to any state limit without having to petition. Does that sound right, Mr. Harris?
I would simplify it for you all, and I
Thank
think
you.
the attorney will also opine probably with the same, is that in the renewal, and I'm looking for the section as we're speaking so I can highlight it, we would just be changing the 5 to a 20, as I understand that you did desire to have a renewal of the district without the petition process up to 20 years. And I can find that section as we speak.
That's correct, Mr. Harris.
Duration,
I see.
so that's,
I see
Yes.
nods, so we'll just
we're working on the back.
We'll let you guys craft it on the back side. And Ms. Crisante, if you could just, sorry to make you try and figure out what we were saying. If you could just take a roll call then.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez,
Aye.
Councilmember Sneddon,
Yes.
Chair Jordan.
Yes.
Okay.
So hopefully that's a portend of the rest of the day to come, right? So I think that's last item. Unless somebody corrects me, nope. So we will be adjourned and be back at council in about 45 minutes. Thanks.